Good evening, everybody. So the time is 7:02 p.m. on Wednesday, May 8th. Call this Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting to order. And before we get started, I'll recognize our new member of the committee, Sean Noble. Welcome, Sean, and thank you for joining us. And we'll move on to the land acknowledgements. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. So I have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated by Legislative Services. Moved by Joanne, seconded by John. Any questions or comments on the agenda? Oh, call the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Hearing none. Please have a motion to receive the meeting minutes of April 10, 2024. Allison, and seconded by Joanne. All vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, and that carries. And this evening. So move on to 7.1, Memorandum for Manager of Parks and Fleet regarding town park accessible program update. So we have a mover and seconder, Allison and Haley.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you, Matt.
Good evening, everyone. So, well, nice to see some of you again. Thank you for having me and the ability to present some of our updates for the town park accessible playground. I'm going to share my screen here with one of the renderings that is attached to the report that you hopefully would have had a chance to quickly review. Can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect. All right, well, just to give you a bit of a general update in terms of the project status. Since January, once we figured out we did have a budget to proceed with this project, we've been working with some consultants to design the replacement of the playground at Town Park with a focus on accessibility and removing as many barriers as we possibly could, acknowledging that there's probably no such thing as a truly barrier-free, totally barrier-free component or playground with completely barrier-free components, but we've certainly put a lot of work in and worked with some various stakeholder groups. I know, Allison, we've met with you. We also had a public information center in February. We invited the public to join us at the Armory to preview an earlier iteration of this plan. And we did take that same material and put it at the SARC for a few weeks and opened up our survey online through Engage Aurora, which was another very important engagement tool. So we did collect a number of responses. I believe we had, if I'm not mistaken, around 20 survey responses. We had a small group show up for the Public Information Center, and then we did have a couple one-on-one chats with some interesting stakeholders, some interested stakeholders rather. So that sort of takes us to where we are now and what you see in front of you. So some of the big changes between what we first shared are, if you can see my cursor here, this is a junior-senior combination play, where originally we had this as basically a senior structure with not as much ramping, and then we had a junior here. So what we've done is, based on some great feedback, we really wanted to be able to include not considerations only for the child users, but potentially for the caregivers and the child supervisors. So how could we do that and be able to have someone, assist their child up through, down a slide, up onto a ramp? So just to break you through sort of the key components list on the report. So you'll see some of this wrapping here. So this drawing doesn't accurately reflect the park pathway system, but this will be a complete asphalt connection, barrier-free right onto this play structure. We've got 2 slides on this one, specifically double slides. If a supervisor, child supervisor wanted to accompany their child down a slide, they could. There are some other components here, specifically that remove barriers for wheelchairs. So these spinner devices are this one's at flush at grade. So the idea is someone in a mobility device, such as a wheelchair, would be able to barrier-free access this piece here. And then similarly up here, there's another spinner device. This one has some special seating to accommodate someone that might be in a mobility device. It isn't, as you can see here, it doesn't have that same flush grade where you'd need assistance to be mounted. And then in this smaller play structure here, you can't see it very well from this angle, but there's some decking here with the idea that it's easiest to sort of climb on and move yourself around with your upper body. It's very wide. There are some interesting slats here that help you sort of pull yourself around if you are using more of your upper body to be mobile. And then the other pieces come towards the swing set. So we've got your typical standard belt seats. And then we've got a wheelchair accessible swing, a toddler swing, and then another mobility style swing over here. This other one here is the roller that I mentioned. This one's a very interesting one as well. You can sort of put a child on this sort of rolling bar and give them a bit of a push. And then as you walk along, they can sort of be pulled along or through their own power, pull themselves along these sort of bars on the top. So that's an interesting one as well. And then we have some other sensory sort of low sensory and less stimulating style stuff here. You can't really see it tucked behind. I can't see it because I've got all our faces here. There it is. But right here, there's some stuff in terms of sensory knobs, colors, switch things. We did get some feedback to not really do too much of that because we often hear that children will play with it once and then it's kind of move on to the next thing because it's not too stimulating, but we wanted to include something for everyone. Similarly up here, another one of those pieces. And then there are some more challenging individual sort of islands. I recognize too, it looks very spread out in this image. It is to scale, but there are very specific requirements in terms of spacing that you need to consider in an accessible playground. So kind of what I said earlier, in no means can you sort of build something that is great for everyone and every component. There are components that are more suitable to certain users and others that are not. But I must say I'm pretty happy with the progress we've made from the first iteration. This addition of the decking, some of these other double slide features, and then the other individual components have brought us to a pretty good place. And I think Town Park will become an accessible playground that will be recognized in York Region, if not the GTA, as having a ton of great and fun features for children and also usable, again, like I said, with their caregivers or supervisors that may also have accessibility needs. So happy to take any questions, dive into any of the details. I'll leave this up for now. But yeah, that's it for my talking points.
Thank you, Matt. I'm just going to call for comments or questions, and Joanne's already has her hand up.
When you're talking about the double slide and you mentioned a caregiver or somebody with them could go down the slide, you could have quite a great difference in between a 2-year-old or 3-year-old going down the slide on one side and a very large adult going down the other. Can it accommodate larger people, even if it's their older brother or something? But can it do that? Or is there any possibility that it could shift the slide over to one side a bit? I would be concerned about that.
That's a great, sorry, through you, Chair. That's a great point. So as far as I know, both slides in the double portions, these individual widths are accommodated up to 12 years of age. So maybe not perhaps like you're pointing out a full-sized adult or a larger adult. So So that's
You
something
said
I can say.
caregiver.
Caregiver, yeah.
Yeah.
I can certainly bring that back to our design team and find out if there are slide pieces through this manufacturer that do achieve what you're mentioning. So that's feedback I can certainly take back.
Even sometimes when you write down what the capabilities of the area would be, you know, take people at a certain age on things. You're still going to have it as a public park, and you're still going to have people go on these things that probably shouldn't be on them either, you know. But I mean, just, you know, trying to use them up. But it's just, I always think of the way they're built and how solid they are.
So, Lois, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Allison after.
Thank you. I was just wondering what the ground surface is made of.
A harder rubber synthetic surface that doesn't really have too much give, so you don't sink into it, but it's also very forgiving and very easy to repair. So in a lot of our town playgrounds now, we've got wood chips in most places. We're slowly transitioning with available budget to rubber surfaces everywhere. But this will all be rubber, and it's completely flush with the curbing that you normally see. They're almost a tile rubber as well. So they're easy to repair and replace spots that might have deterioration over time. Instead of having to do a full replacement, you can basically take out a tile, and again, they're, from what I understand, completely flush when they join each other. There are no rigid gaps or sort of little tiny divots that'll pull you in one way or another. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Allison, and then Haley on deck.
This is all music to my ears, and I love and appreciate the adjustments to the design since we met. Just to echo, there definitely are slides that are double wide without the slat, and I think another consideration should be at least one. I know that metal slides are a heat issue. However, there is research to suggest it's good for kids with cochlear implants, as plastic slides can create a disruption. So I think that that's something to consider. With respect to the swings, I know there's an adapted swing that still requires somebody to be lifted out of their wheelchair and onto the swing. I know when we met, we talked about the fact that an actual swing for a wheelchair to roll onto a platform swing does require a lot of clearance. I don't know what that clearance is. I would implore us to revisit that in the spirit of they're very rare to find. If we consider many conversations at our town around wanting to bring in traffic for various things, if I think of Town Square and I think of the Armory, the events we have at the park, the farmers market, this is the park to consider something like that. They're rare to find, and I know people will travel to come use it. So I would love to see one. I will use it. I also think, you know, yes, plays for kids, but plays for everyone. And I'd much rather older kids play at the park than get up to trouble. So I hope my boys will consider a playground when they're older versus other activities. But I love it. I'm excited, and I will be a frequent user. And thank you for your efforts and for all the considerations.
Thanks, Allison. Haley.
So Allison took two of my thoughts, one being that the plastic slides, I would say to consider having at least one slide be metal if possible for someone with cochlear implants. And also the swing with the accessible rolling chair. She took two of my ideas there. But I was curious if in any of the sensory areas, any musical stuff is being used, because I know that tends to be used more often and kids get less bored because there's musical xylophones for parks, there's drums for parks that I've seen that you could put in where it's not terribly noisy, but it's a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thanks for the feedback. When we were talking originally about the slide, I thought you guys meant a slat, but a little bit over to one side. Yeah, there are definitely double width slides without slats. So I'll bring that back to our landscape architecture team and look at that. Similarly, I understand the reason we may not have included that particular swing was because of size constraints and having to lose some of the just traditional swings. Normally we would put 2 toddler swings and 2 belt swings together, but this being a playground that is again not typical and something that we want to do to open it up to more users, I was okay to have lost that 1 toddler swing. So I'll revisit it again with our landscape architect team and confirm that we are or are not able to potentially accommodate that specific swing. And same thing with the metal material. Remind me, what was the last part of the question or comment?
Is there any musical?
Oh, sound, sorry, yes. As far as I understand now, there is not, but that could just be because I haven't read enough of the details in the sensory board stuff, but I will take that back, and if it's feasible, I think it's a great point. And I remember as a kid even just having those little sort of tubes you could yell in on one end of the playground and hear somebody on the end, and we would spend hours just talking to each other as if we had never done that before. So I'll take that back. That's great feedback, Haley. Thank you.
Comment on that. Oh,
Sorry, Gregory.
Joe, Matt, just a question and to follow up with Allison and Haley's points about the swing. If we can add it, I think that's one thing, and I think that's the best option. But if something needs to be removed in order to fit it, is there a particular piece that we would remove to ensure that we could get that swing in? And I'm just trying to think of options so that, Matt, we're not kind of going back and forth. Like, if you're going back to the consultant with, can we add this? I don't want it to be a no. But let's compromise to say, okay, we really want this, and we'll remove something else. I'm just trying to think ahead so that we can save some time down the road. So more so a question for you when you go back. And I don't know if Haley and Allison had a thought on that.
Yeah, my thought was that there's already 2 spinner activities. Of course, I'm going to prefer the one that a wheelchair can go on. So when I look at the map, I look at moving the spinner that you wheel on, substituting the blue one. And I would actually keep the wheelchairs. I think on our playground at Bloorview, the swing that's for a wheelchair to ride on, it might even be separate from the other swing structure. So you don't have to lose the swings you've got. It's like a different structure altogether, which would be fine. Yeah, that was my thought too, was to lose something. And to me, it's any of them. I see a couple climbing things, like, do we need 2? There's also plenty of climbing on the 2 structures, but I could go on and on. So I'm going to stop.
Get that feedback. Thank you. Yeah, we'll take a look and see what we can potentially lose through you, Chair. I know too, there's a bit of a budget consideration. So when we go back to council in a couple of weeks, we're expecting the tender proposal to have gone up a little bit from what we originally proposed. So we will have to request some extra funding for council. So I'll take a look and see with our design team. I don't want to speak to specifically reorienting the entire playground just because the LAs are that's their bread and butter and they're the designers. So I don't want to say that it can be configured in a way that it might not be. So let me take that back again and maybe get some costs and see what it would cost for that specific feature and see how it factors into everything. That's all right.
We'll go to Sean, then Peter.
Sure, Matt, this isn't necessarily accessibility, but it is a safety concern. We saw a park west of there called Copland. It's one of the newish parks, and the construction seemed to fail in a way that was dangerous in about 4 or 5 years, where the bottom of the swings, I think bigger kids were probably running up them. They would crack and they would cut children going down. And they would have to fill them in, but it would take some time for someone to come with resin from Parks and Rec and actually fix that. So do we have any idea, are the quality standards higher than maybe they would have been 5-10 years ago?
Sure, great question. I will say there have been a ton of advancement in the quality of playground equipment over the last decade, even from late, I'd say, 90s to early 2000s. They were still using a lot of wood, and then it sort of it was combined with that very thick polyvinyl plastic, and then it became more of that sort of bubble structure that you see now. Just to understand a bit of what you're describing, are you talking about sort of where the feet would hit the ground under the swing, or the swings
It would
itself?
usually, it would be at the very base of the longer slides. I think it's from kids standing on them, they would crack, and they would crack horizontally, and that would present an edge that would cut children going down.
Yeah, so there are very different swings. The ones we're talking about now are, sorry, swings, slides. They are that sort of bubble material where they almost have two edges with a bit of a hollow between them, if that makes sense. So they should be less resistant to cracking. I have only built a few playgrounds with the town in my short time here, and I haven't received any calls lately of anything cracking. So I don't know that in new materials it's happening as much, but the one you described now, is it like that today? Like, is that something that was reported, or?
It may have been replaced by now, but it
Okay.
was filled in with resin. But again, it takes sometimes weeks for that to be addressed. So I think parents probably put duct tape over it until it was fixed properly.
Yeah, I can see how they would even maybe pinch you as you would go over if it would
Yeah,
compress it.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And
well,
also the auditory or sensory sort of option, I think that's a great idea. I would second that.
Okay, next is Peter.
Hi, thanks, Matt, for the presentation. I just had a question about, it sort of has to do with this being the centerpiece park in terms of accessibility for the town. One thing that might be an opportunity to get two birds with one stone would be around those swings, like the accessible, the harnessed swing and the disc swing and the spinner and so on. It seems like a good place where you could have signage that would indicate that these are intended primarily for people who need them, who have, mobility devices or needs that need these pieces of equipment, but also a chance to kind of inform people about those disabilities. So not just, a typical accessibility sign like the wheelchair sign, but something that would give a little bit of information. Just because that's something, I mean, it's always a little bit awkward. We often have to say, like, would you mind trading swings with us so that we can use this swing for my son who needs it? And instead of just having a big, wheelchair sign plastered on it, it would be a really good way to sort of show that this is intended to be a, educational as well as accessible for people in the town.
Peter, that's fantastic feedback, and I think we will. I'll take that back with my director as well to see if we can work up a plan that isn't just something that says this is for accessible people with accessible needs or something like that. No, I think it would be good to have an education piece and maybe a bit of instruction on how to use things properly as well.
Yeah, so that it doesn't just say it's for, because it's for everybody, but please make room for someone who needs it if they are here. Yeah,
that's great feedback. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Next we'll go to Haley, Allison, and then Joanna.
Another thought I had, and I'm curious if it was thought about, is a communication board. So like some kids with autism or communication needs have devices, but they can't use them necessarily at the park for various reasons. And I'm curious if a communication board with basic things to help with that was considered.
Thank you, Haley. To be honest, I don't believe it was. Through some of the feedback we'd received, this is the first time I sort of heard of something like this. So just for my understanding, Haley, like, what does that specifically look like? Or
so it has basic pictures, so like a picture of a slide, a picture of the swing, go picture or break, like different just pictures with words that a kid could point to that to
Okay.
communicate with their friends or communicate with their caregiver what they want to do.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. No, I don't believe that we've considered that through this process, but it's not completely too late to look into that. So I'll bring that back as well. Along with, some of the comments from Peter as well. So potentially those two efforts could be combined in one way or another. Thank you.
Next, we have Allison.
Love Haley's point about the communication board. Something I've read about in many forums around accessible playgrounds is an acknowledgement that there's an importance around fencing. So if there's the ability to somehow fence, especially on the side of the park where there's a street, it becomes much more safe for kids with different developmental disabilities who might be runners, and they're less likely to run away and run into traffic. So fencing as much as possible is definitely newer best practice. I realize that also contains people, they've got to have exits. So I don't entirely know what that looks like, but I know it's a good consideration. The other thing I've seen, to Haley's point, is also a little bit different shapes or using, paint to create games on the surface. So even having like the alphabet or numbers or a hopscotch, you can create activities just with the surface. You don't even need the rest of the stuff. I had one more point. Swing. Speaking of signs, if we need to get some of our developer friends who were paying for Town Square to help make this more accessible, we can thank them with a sign. So we can fundraise if there's a budget issue. I'm here for the fundraising.
Thanks, Allison. Joanne, what's next?
Well, I think I'm sort of being covered in a sense, but I really understood the point about putting a sign up or anything. You have to also be so careful not to indicate to everybody that that's the only thing that park's for. And it should be everybody be included and everybody be, wonderful to one another. And it's just, the other questions I had were sort of answered, so.
John.
I haven't had an opportunity to speak yet, so everybody else has. Queens Jubilee Park has been around for several years. Is there any deficiencies there that we can learn from at all? Is that possible? Maybe go through the list if there was any feedback in that.
Thank you for the
Anywhere?
I looked at it this past summer, John, other than sand coming out of the sand pit and not being replaced, so causing problems on the path of travel, at first glance, the equipment itself and the structure and the ground and everything else seems to still be intact. But the technical stuff and the safety stuff, I'll have to defer that one to Matt and the parks team. But nothing has come across my desk on deficiencies. I know Allison's ready to jump at this one, but deficiency-wise, there's in safety, nothing that has really come out other than really the sand kind of coming out of the pit. That's about it.
Okay.
John, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Allison?
You're on mute.
Yep. So I went to visit because when my son was little and we wanted to explore parks and he wants me to play with him, I was like, where can we go? Everyone was talking about Queens Jubilee. So we went to check it out. Apart from the rubberized surface, there was not one thing that I, as a wheelchair user, could interact with. There is a sand pit with a sand table, but it's down a curb cut and then obviously in sand, which is not accessible. There's climbing structures. There's one kindergarten, I guess, age play structure, but it was steps, so I couldn't get up to it. So then the only thing he wanted to do with me was play what would be those sensory games, but the games were broken. So something, to Haley's point, like music is, I think, more durable and more interactive and fun for a kid than the tic-tac-toe that breaks or, but I found it as a wheelchair user, I was like extremely disappointed and was wondering how we qualified that as an accessible or inclusive playground.
She answered my question.
Mhm.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you, Allison. Just following along the lines of Sean's question regarding wear and tear and deficiencies. Matt or Greg, how frequently? My understanding is that all the town parks are checked for QC every year. What exactly do they check for? And when you have a brand new park, does the manufacturer come and actually, for the first couple of years, do their own checks, or how does that work?
Matt, you want to take that one?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Counselor. So we actually inspect our parks monthly as required. And when something is brand new, once it's I believe there might be one walkthrough with the manufacturer once we sign off and the installation is completed, and then it's on the town to inspect monthly. And they're going out, so you have to be certified to be a playground inspector. So it's parks operations staff. We have a few of them, a handful. And the idea is you're going and looking out for any deficiencies, anything that might be cracked, anything that might be poking, any protruding rust, anything that might look unbolted, anything that would require us to temporarily close off a section of the playground. And it does happen from time to time, and we are pretty quick to respond. And then sometimes we rely on customer service to pass along a call that a resident might have put off. And usually, to be honest, caregivers and child supervisors are the quickest to send us any kind of information, often before we've even discovered it in an inspection, because it's during the busy season, the swings and stuff are being used every day. So we do appreciate that feedback, but yeah, it's monthly.
Thanks, Matt.
Welcome.
Any other question, Greg?
So I did have a couple things, but of course you all covered it because you're all amazing. Signage, this has come up, and Peter, to your comments, I've had quite a few residents actually call with the same issue. And they're, of course, looking for kind of me to step in to provide some of that support, which, I can't always do, to be out there. But it is really that conversation of, we do have accessible features, and the people who actually need it can't use it because other people are using it. So Matt, if we're looking at something to do with signage, I think the word priority comes to mind, like, having that priority for, as was mentioned many times by multiple people, this is a park for everyone, but really to be considerate of others that are using it, and should somebody need that equipment, to step aside and allow them to use it. But again, Peter, you're right. It is a kind of that awkward conversation that needs to happen with an adult, and sometimes the children, and maybe even their parents aren't even around to have that conversation, to say, can you please step aside so we can use this? Otherwise we can't play here. The other thing, Matt, I chatted with Steve a couple years ago now. Apparently signage also has safety requirements as well. So just for the group here to consider, from my remembrance of the conversation, I believe they had to be in the external perimeter of the signage. We couldn't have things inside. The conversation of stickers, I think, came up to try to put them on some of the poles or the apparatuses, which could have worked. But again, Matt, just more so of a comment from what I remember back when this comment had come up a couple years ago. Putting up a sign wasn't as easy as saying the words. So that was just, I guess, my experience on that. Everything else that I think was mentioned is great. And the other thing, Matt, I don't know if you're going to mention it in the conversation. We're also trying to apply for a grant as well to help assist. I actually completed my letter of support to assist with this project as well, on behalf of course, accessibility advisor, this committee, and the multi-year accessibility plan, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and all the other work that we're doing. You know, I did touch on Allison to the comments. Whether we like it or not, Queen Diamond Jubilee is we'll call it a lot of accessible and sensory equipment involved. But this is really a much more accessible playground and park, and really in the center of Aurora. And that's kind of what I used in the letter of support that I have submitted. So hopefully we get that grant and will help support this project as well. So I wanted to just add that also.
Alice?
In terms of signage, I'm just wondering, like, I'm looking at the swing structure. So at our playground at Bloorview, there's actually like a large chunk of, say, metal or whatever the frame is. So the purple bars that are arched have a thick piece on it. And we actually use that for recognition, for donor recognition signage, which are just like a peel and stick sticker. So perhaps exploring that, a sticker solution.
Yep.
I know this group has talked about series of videos for different things. Happy to help make a video to orient people to the playground. So someone could watch a video and learn about the different aspects and why they're for everyone, but what makes them unique and accessible. And my last comment is, Greg, I know I shared this with you. Dr. Tim Ross at Holland Bloorview, who works in our Bloorview Research Institute, did a talk a couple of weeks ago, and playgrounds are his thing. He wrote our Accessible Playgrounds Playbook. And he used the comment, can I play and can I stay? And there are a few additional things to consider outside of the playground itself that would be important for the parks team, which is to really look at the washrooms. They're going to need an overhaul at some point and be way more inclusive if we want this to be an accessible hub. I know we talk lots about parking and adequate accessible parking. Going above and beyond the quota would be wise at this park. And shade, ample shade for kids. So lots of kids with disabilities have issues regulating heat, especially folks with spinal cord injury. I know at Bloorview as well, in our garden throughout, I don't know if we do it on the playground so much, I can look and take a picture, but considering installing big canopies, that would even provide shade at some of these activities. So I can sit at the activity, but I'm going to be protected from the sun. Is important. So can I play and can I stay is a great thing to remember when we make an inclusive space. And now I promise I'm done.
Thanks, Haley, or sorry, Allison. I just talking about signage, we have to remember too that some folks with who are non-sighted or have low vision might be using these parks as well. And so signage, it would be important to offer that in accessible formats, contrast and print size, and perhaps braille or other means of communicating what it is that we need to do. I loved your point about connectivity. Often we create these things, but they're not connected. So the washrooms aren't there, the parking's not there, or it's well into the park itself. So for folks to get to it, they have to walk clear across and such. So keeping that in mind is really, really important for access. And I have a question about, it's a little bit off topic, but it's about a park that I was at this week, and just a thought when it's appropriate to talk about that. It's not about that particular park.
In town?
Pardon me?
In town?
In town, yeah. So when it's appropriate, I'll ask my question. Sure.
I don't know if Matt's going to stay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Lois.
Go ahead. I was at the dog park the other day and I was sitting there and I realized that it is not accessible for folks. I sat at an accessible picnic table, which was great, but it was way down at the bottom and there was a hill of wood chips. So a person using a chair wouldn't even be able to get to that. Not to mention the gates at the front that I know are made so that the dogs can't escape and such, but I had difficulty opening it and I'm standing as well. So I was just thinking, this isn't accessible for someone who may have a service animal who wants to take them to the dog park. And such. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Moving on to item 7.2.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks,
Town of
everyone. Have a great
Aurora.
night.
Thank you, Matt. Town of Aurora Multi-Year Accessibility Plan, 2022 to 26. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Haley and John. And great, would you like to speak to the end?
Sure. Yep. Okay. So I got a lot. That's why there's only 2 items on the agenda today. So I'm going to start with National Accessibility Week because Allison, you brought this up, and it's relevant to the comment you just made about parks. So we have, as I mentioned at our last meeting, now have completed our 2 videos that we will be launching during National Accessibility Week. The plan moving forward is to have multiple video series or videos throughout the year, and then we would recycle them as the needs come up, or as there are certain events, or if there's any relation to a specific international or national campaign. We would kind of resurface them so they would live on our SharePoint site. We will be creating some social media awareness around it as well, sending an all staff email, launching it. And at the end of the day, similar to the parks town park project, we are encouraging all staff when they have a large project that does involve some form of accessibility to let me know. And then we can look forward to say, how can we make this better? How are we, removing barriers? What are we doing in town? And then do a video showcase with those projects. So really getting the rest of our organization involved with the work that they're doing to showcase that work, B, our commitments to accessibility in town with these projects. And then, of course, our community members to be the stars of our show. So that is the plan once town hall or town park is completed, hopefully next year, Allison. We will be asking for committee members. I'll start here. And if not, then community members to be the participants in the video and to really speak to, again, what the town is doing for accessibility and why said feature, in this case, town park, is relevant to you and the family and as a community member. So that is the plan. It is, of course, we want the project to be completed first. We can have it in the background and do that. But we also want to discuss, talk about special events and accessible special events throughout the year. Our 2 videos that we did create, one was on trails. So as we embark on our accessibility assessments for our trails this year, which I do have an update on that. So we do have a video talking about that commitment to our trails. And the other one is with one of our staff speaking about employment in the town and why she feels important in the work that she does here in town as a staff member working with a disability. So we do have those 2 videos created. I did watch them both this week, actually one today and one the other day, and they are amazing. I can't share them yet. I really wish I could have, but I can't yet. We are in the final stages of tuning them up, but keep an eye on them in a couple of weeks from that. So I'll leave that. I mean, I'll open up the floor here on that item. If there's any questions, we'll go one by one. I do have like 6 or 7 items to talk about today. So I'll go item by item.
Questions or comments, anybody?
It might be good, maybe not this year. You're talking about highlighting an employee with a disability, is that what?
That was one of our videos, yeah.
It might be good to have any employee, not necessarily a person with a disability, talk about why accessibility is important in the job that they do and the customers that they serve.
Hmm.
So that we're not just highlighting like a poster
Mhm, mhm.
kind of thing, but we're showing that our staff understand the importance of accessibility and what it means to serve our residents in accessible ways. Probably too late now, but just a thought.
No, we only did two. So too late for these two. But that doesn't mean we can't do it for future videos.
Sean?
For the rookie on the team, what is the communication strategy? I'm very interested. I know you mentioned internally, I guess, SharePoint. What platforms would that see afterwards?
So working with our communication team, we will be sending an all staff email to have staff aware of this project. We are planning to post the two separate videos. They're going to be hosted on our YouTube page, so they'll permanently be there. Our communication team is going to create a montage reel to get up on Instagram. We are getting a lot of good interaction with reels on Instagram lately, so they really want to push, create something there to increase viewership. And then we're going to have it also content on LinkedIn and all our other social media platforms, Facebook and I believe Twitter as well, or X, I should say. So that is the public facing side, all our social channels, and then the internal side with an all staff communication where we are also talking about the video, our commitments, encouraging staff to let me know of their projects moving forward so we can showcase those, similar to what you mentioned, Lois, as well as reminding everyone of Red Shirt Day on the 29th. So that's kind of all going to be together in one email. May.
That sounds great. Have we ever added traditional media or even just local, like the banner type news bureaus? They're all electronic now. Have they ever covered these stories?
We would create a media release, and it would be that, so that would kind of go out, and then they would pick up on that media release, and should they want to cover it. My plan, and when I talk about the accessibility assessment for trails, the plan is to invite them to come in and take those photos and have a more newspaper presence and more formal media presence externally as well, and inviting council to do the same. So that is the plan with that project, which will go in line with the one video that we are creating as well. So they'll kind of go hand in hand. I have to double check. I'm sorry, Sean, I don't have the answer if we are doing a media release for this project specifically. I'd have to double check on that.
Great, thank you.
There's been a lot lately on this, so I'll double check on that.
Thank you, Sean. Anyone else?
Okay.
Greg, you have any other?
Yep. Alrighty. So the next one we talked about is the accessibility assessment for trails. We do have to go through a formal procurement process. There was a lot of back and forth, but from my understanding early this week, the terms have finally been accepted. The contract has been sent, and I'm hoping as we speak, the contract was signed and sent back. So if not this week, then early next week, and then we can commence the project to get going. So again, an update, and Sean, I guess FYI, last year we connected with Access Now to assess and verify our 8 main facilities: our recreation complexes, town hall, the JOC, and also the Pet House, which is the historic building behind the senior center back here. So we have those 8 buildings that were assessed. We have 7 more to do, which includes the 3 buildings at Town Square. So the library, the public library, Town Square, and the cultural center, which were under renovation, along with Victoria Hall and 2 others that we own. So I want to, some of which are not accessible, but we want to go through the process of verifying them to say what parts are accessible for certain individuals, what parts are not for others, so that everyone can make informed decisions. And then all our buildings will be verified. And then we are progressing for, I think it's almost 1,000 meters of trail, if not more, throughout town. So we have 14 different trails that are through town. That will be this year's project that we will be completing. And again, similar to a facility assessment where they show partially accessible, non-accessible, and fully accessible, the trails assessment will show the same, along with features throughout the trail. So rest stations, garbages, benches, that sort of thing, along with the surface of the trail. So where we go from paved to gravel to grass or dirt, and more natural. All of these assessments are done with a universal design lens with Rick Hansen certified individuals that also have disabilities. So they will be coming in to do these assessments. And as I mentioned at our last meeting, I will be extending the invite once we have a formalized plan. I will be extending the invites to all of you, so this committee can participate in a portion of the assessment to just get that experience. Maybe we're near your house and you wanted to come for that day, or if you wanted to drive across town, it's totally up to you, but I will share when I have a better idea of our plan. Of course, it's weather pending, but I will definitely share that, so for your experiences as well. And then moving forward, as we are approaching budget time, I will be submitting the assessments for our parks, which is a large capital ask this coming year, to finish our project. We have 69 parks on our roster, and so it's going to be quite a bit of work. I'm not sure if they'll get it done in a year, maybe 2, but it is a large undertaking. So it would just follow that same process of which parks are fully accessible, partially accessible, non-accessible, and what features, from, as we mentioned with this town park, from washrooms to access into the park, parking, and so on and so forth. So it's again beyond that, but it will complement our trails assessment, as a lot of our parks are attached to a trail anyways. So that is that, and I'm looking forward to getting that started throughout the spring and summer.
Lois.
Great stuff. You're gonna be busy. Thanks. I'm just thinking about some opportunities here.
Mhm.
So, I mentioned about continuity, and I know that the region has accessible trails and they've created guidelines and such. And so it would present an opportunity. I don't know if you've spoken with James Lane at the region. Because we live in a big region and we're all using the trails and such. It would be great if our users had the same experience at each trail. So that, it wouldn't matter which boundary they were in. It was a similar access level. So just a thought there that you could contact them and they could send you a copy of those guidelines and maybe talk to them about their experience, because they've made several in the regional forests. And it's quite a balance to make trails accessible to maintain the natural environment as well. And then I was thinking back to the park. So sorry about this, I'm going backwards again. But, Newmarket's doing their accessible park at the New Lock residence. And I just wondered if you've contacted, can't remember the person's name at Newmarket, to share ideas and compare and hear what their plans are and perhaps share our plans. We might be able to help them because we might be further ahead.
So I will follow up with Matt on that. So I'm not sure if he has, it's his project, so I can definitely follow up to see. I didn't even know they were doing that, so that would be good. In terms of trails, I definitely will reach out for guidelines, but I do know attached to us, Richmond Hill has done Access Now and their trails, which their trails do feed into Aurora's trails as well in our south end, and then they go north, so along Bloomington. So at least on that side, there'll be that, again, that continuity and that similar experience from residents crossing over Bloomington from Richmond Hill into Aurora. So at least on that side, I'm not sure if Aurora borders any regional trails.
And that's not my point about the border. My point is that if someone were to get in the car and go to
In
another,
travel, okay.
that they'd have the,
Standardized.
yeah, they'd have the same level of
Yep.
access to accessibility.
Can definitely look into that.
But certainly if it connects to Richmond Hill or Newmarket, it should.
Yeah.
Also, you know.
Anyone else with questions or comments on this topic?
Compliance reporting. I wanted to provide an update on our compliance. So at the end of last meeting, I did bring up that we were working with the ministry and had a conversation. So we did have that conversation. I did have a conversation with our director and my manager. It was a great conversation amongst all parties. And based on that conversation, we clarified why we felt, or why I felt, the town was non-compliant upon submitting our compliance report. And after talking with the ministry, a lot of the items that we were submitting non-compliance for were things that were out of the scope of our control, that we'd had no control over changing some of that content and some of that material. So it was a lot of that historical content that was provided to us that may have been inaccessible. And those are some of the items that we don't have contractual obligation to change or modify. And in that sense, the region agreed that what we are doing and all the things that we do have in our control are compliant, and therefore we have resubmitted compliance and are therefore now compliant with the ministry and are no longer on a compliance plan, as we were apparently on one, which I wasn't aware of for the past couple of years since our last 2020 submission prior to me starting. So I wanted to provide an update on you there. The biggest part of non-compliance was web and the WCAG standard, as about 400 municipalities have the same issue. But again, upon speaking to the ministry directly, a lot of those challenges, again, because we don't directly control our website and our template, we can only do as much as our contractor that controls it can do with the templates and some of those things that do get flagged from screen readers and some of the other standards. They are things that we can't control and doesn't necessarily hinder the experience of the user. Some of the things are just in the background that we can't even see or find that are tripping them up. And the ministry is aware of that. They're also aware that we submit compliance today, tomorrow we might not be compliant just due to the nature of our business, and they understand that as well. As long as we're actively working towards putting this as a priority, and our website coordinator is doing a phenomenal job to really work towards this. His goal is to not have any flags whatsoever with any check, which is great to see. So that is something that is a constant battle with our vendors and our contractors and that sort of thing. But because of that, we have now submitted compliance. So I just wanted to present that back to this team.
Thank you, Greg. Questions or comments here?
Alrighty, good. Private affordable housing York region. So this was one of the emails. I apologize, the last couple of weeks there was quite a few emails sent to you, but things just came fast and furious, and I wanted to share all of the stuff happening. So May 1st, last week, the York Region held a private affordable housing meeting to discuss their, I guess, their action plan. I did recognize, and Sean, I know I didn't respond to you, but I know you were part of that, at least the first part of the meeting. I was there for pretty much the end of that meeting. So the focus was really on the region and how they're going to really support municipalities and therefore developers with this affordable housing. Sean asked a very good question, and thank you, Sean, for bringing that forward. Unfortunately, it wasn't directly answered. If accessible housing would have been part of this affordable housing plan, they kind of skirted around the issue. Really, they did talk more so about an aging population and that consideration. So one could assume that accessibility would be part of that conversation. But really, the focus for the conversation kind of got taken over a lot by the developers themselves who were part of the conversation and speaking about their concerns and their issues as a developer to do this. And their voices were very loud throughout the conversation. That was very, and then of course the time ran out and the conversation ended. But last night at Committee of the Whole, the planning staff actually were looking to create an Aurora affordable housing action plan as well. And from the sounds of it, it looks to align with the region's action plan also. And this, I was able to speak to Mr. Rob, who is looking after this report. It sounds like a draft report will be presented to council in June. I'm not sure if it's going to be at Committee of the Whole or council, but a draft plan will be coming to council come June. And then my understanding is that I've requested this committee be part of that conversation as well to provide the feedback, insights and comments on our own action plan moving forward. So at least this is more Aurora based and we can have a bigger say of what that might look like. So again, and Sean, if you wanted to, anything else you wanted to add that I may have missed?
No, just it definitely got lively when the developers started talking about development fees and how that is a major factor in affordability.
Mhm.
And you said this was the regional affordable housing plan?
Mhm.
And you didn't see anything about accessibility, is that what you, or they didn't answer the question?
They didn't answer the question and
So
really focus on it.
Is it possible for this committee to write the region and say we'd like to see inclusion about,
Through council.
pardon me?
Let's go through council. We can advise council.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you could ask for that.
yeah.
So we can advise our,
Yeah.
You could ask
Can-
them to do it.
And just say, you know, we want to make it known that the Aurora AAC would like to see accessible housing included in the affordable housing plan.
In the same manner, we have a quota of accessible parking spots in a parking lot. We should have accessible housing as a group project sort of thing. So whether it's 15%, 10%, whatever, but should be some standard.
so I think for a comment, for this comment, let's see what my recommendation would be. Let's see what our affordable housing action plan looks like in Aurora. Because again, the region would be assisting and providing that support. But ultimately and it was mentioned quite a few times, Sean, I don't know if you caught it, but towards the end, at least, it was mentioned, we're here to support the municipalities. The municipalities ultimately would be approving these. And so it was kind of a regional kind of, I guess, recommendation, if you will, to provide this. But ultimately it fell to the municipalities to see what they wanted to do. So I'm hoping that this affordable action plan that we are putting forward, we can include a lot of that stuff and then again, go above and beyond what the region might do. But in terms of the request, I think that would have to go through our council and maybe our mayor could bring it to regional council to say, can this be brought forward or included? I haven't had a chance to look through their large plan. I mean, I think a quick control find for the word accessibility might be the easy approach on that front. But personally, yeah, I haven't had a chance to look through it in detail. They just may not have said it in the meeting. So it might be there. I just
I just think it's a broader plan for the whole region, so it would be, if we can influence it,
Yeah.
an opportunity. I don't know if this committee's done that kind of thing before. What do others think? I don't know.
Well, as John said, we can recommend it to the council and the council could take it forward on behalf of the town.
I mean, the other thing we can ask is, I can see if the region's AAC provided input to see if the region's accessibility advisory committee provided some of the feedback, and maybe we'll start there. Because if the answer is yes, then we may not need to go through this process, and then we just have to look into it.
If the answer is yes, and they took that feedback,
Mm,
but if they
good point.
didn't, maybe if AACs from all the municipalities did something, but yeah, I would start with them and see.
Mhm.
Because the message can come from more than one place, right? It has more.
And I
power
think if
than
all regional AACs say the same thing,
all municipal ones.
all municipal ones, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah.
I still find that throughout town, I guess people built buildings and put in places with parking. And of course, that used to be way back when there wasn't as many parking spaces allotted for anybody that had a challenge of any sort. And I'm finding that I go to a very large parking lot for my medical doctor, and there's 2 spots allotted. And 1 spot around the back is allotted to the doctor in there who is in a wheelchair herself. So that's exactly what there is for this whole parking lot. It goes down both sides of the building, and one side of the building's ramped and the other side of the building isn't ramped. And I don't get they have an administrative office in there. I don't tell anybody I'm on this committee or anything, but I went in and I spoke for myself. And I said, could you tell me why you don't have it ramped? Well, there's not like enough room, but all they have to do is cut out and at each end of their sidewalk, they don't have ramps either. So if you get down to the end of the parking lot and want to come up, you have to walk up where all the traffic travels. And it's a real problem, and I think the town should really make some of these people correct the things that are happening. I mean, if 2 spots are there for a whole medical building, it doesn't make any sense, because even if the person isn't challenged for life, it's somebody might be from an operation, you know what I mean? And I just don't get it. I really don't. And I think the town really has to look into some of this stuff.
So I don't disagree with you. However, legislation there's no footing, there's no real ability for the town to enforce any of these things. So until legislation changes, then our design of public spaces for the AODA, I'm hoping is coming out this year. It was supposed to be out at the end of last year and then early this year, and we've yet to see it. But a lot of those things that you're mentioning will be part of that. Again, currently, the definitions are very vague. The recommendations put forward by the committee are really looking at clarifying a lot of the definitions moving forward. A lot of the recommendations, like I said, in past meetings, there's 130 plus recommendations to add to the design of public spaces, a lot of which are internal of the buildings. Currently, there's nothing in the AODA that talks about the interior of buildings. So hopefully that happens. And there's also a request being put forward for retroactive changes moving forward, at which point, once it becomes part of the legislation and part of the AODA, then there would be a point of compliance. There's probably going to be a period that companies and organizations will need to do these. The other challenge is a lot of the tenants would love to do it, but they don't own those facilities or those buildings. They just rent or lease, and it becomes the owner of the facility themselves to do that work, not necessarily those tenants. So in a lot of cases, I mean, if they own their own building, that's one thing, but that's very rare. So that is another part to consider. All the people that you speak about, and we've come across, over my last couple of years. Fortunately, they're all tenants, and they kind of hands up, we can't do it because we don't own the building or the facility. The AODA also says once we're renovating the whole property, then accessibility comes into effect. What is renovation? And how do we define that? Well, that is not currently defined.
Well, I mean, I know we're a wonderful old-fashioned town, and we have those still a bit around. But the thing is, some of the stores, I mean, aren't putting in automatic doors. I mean, how does a person in a wheelchair go into the doors if they don't open? I went to get 2 gallons of paint, and I said to the guy, "Do you mind putting it in my car? It's right out in front of your building." He said, "Okay." So he couldn't get the door open with my 2 cans of paint, and he was trying to hold it for me because I had a cane. And I'm thinking to myself, and I just sort of kiddingly said to him, "Oh, I guess an automatic door opener would work there."
Yep.
But the thing is, it's everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, it's buildings that have been up for a while, many years, and none of them have really been thoroughly renovated. A lot of them go through a building permit process, remove a wall, add a counter, and they're doing minimal work, at which point accessibility AODA is not enforced. I believe our last meeting, we had a plan. It was the retirement residence that we were talking about, the additional parking spaces, and a comment came back of this is a residence, and therefore AODA does not apply, period. So again, we're still challenged with dealing with these sorry?
Old views.
Yep.
Mhm.
And this misunderstanding. Again, these are developers, these are people just building the building, and then they're going to lease it out to a company to manage the building. And then that company that's managing the facility is going to say, well, it's the builder's responsibility to put these here, but the builder's following a building code standard, which is very minimal. So hopefully, again, with the design of public spaces review, and hopefully that will influence a change in the building code, which will influence a change in the rest of our facilities moving forward. So at least, again, should we be taken to court, there's nothing that the town kind of has a leg to stand on to say, this is the law, and therefore it has to be done, because it's currently not.
Maybe
And so
they-
that's the problem.
Maybe the heads of all these companies should get in a wheelchair and try to get through the doors. And then they'd see how they'd have to build.
So on that note, I did see I guess a cartoon or an image, and I'm not sure if anyone on the call has seen it, but it was titled "The Curb Effect," and it was a cartoon. Wish I could find it, but I'm sure if you Google it, you'll see it. But it was a curb cut on a sidewalk, a very black and white image with highlights of everything that had wheels. Anything you can think of that had wheels, that was showcased on this image. And it says, when you build for accessibility, we build for all. And it had an individual holding a dolly with full of boxes. It had a person biking over top of this curb cut. It had individuals in wheelchairs, parents with strollers, bikes, skateboards, anything else you could think of with wheels. It was pretty much on this image. And it was again, a powerful image to really understand this point. Like you said, if I had a door opener, I can easily bring things in and out of this door. Again, accessibility is not just for people with disabilities, it's for all of us. And when we change that mentality and that thought process of, again, those old views into let's just build for everybody, this just makes sense.
If we took all the engineers with all the old views that they have and we had a course for them and showed them what happens when people do these things, then maybe they'd wake up to it, because they can be very, very difficult in their thinking.
Yeah.
And they're very, limited the way they think. They think the way they build things, and they don't think about everybody else.
So disability related courses are now starting to appear in
Should be.
planning courses in universities and that sort of thing. I don't know if they're mandatory or elective. They should be mandatory, but they are starting to appear in those courses. And I believe I heard one of the universities, it might be OCAD, I'm not sure which, is offering a dedicated course in university specifically for this topic, for I believe architects, engineers, or planners, one of the three. So we're starting to see that. It should have been done many years ago. I don't disagree. Accessible Standards Canada is also working towards an Accessible Canada, which standards are much, much higher than what we are seeing, but that's 10 to 15 years away. So just like the AODA 20 years ago, when it was into effect, an Accessible Ontario by next year, Accessible Canada will, Accessible Canada will elevate that bar. And from our understanding, Ontario has already signed on to also elevate their bar.
They don't realize how
I'll be retired, but
far behind they really are, because in the sixties, I was at the Ontario Crippled Children's Center, which is now Blue Review. And we were there through thalidomide, everything. And the way that we had to get going with the people weren't even going onto the accessibility issues that way back. And it was just really too bad. And I see it, and to me, it's slowed down. It hasn't got going again somehow. I don't know why. So.
Allison has a.
Alice.
It's slightly off topic, but it's worth chiming in. I've heard a couple comments about, the idea that folks try a wheelchair to see how inaccessible things are, or the comment about asking employees who maybe don't have a disability why it's important. And I just want to emphasize that it's, I think, imperative to always use lived experience first and foremost. There's research to suggest any kind of try on a disability exercise does the opposite that we hope it does. It doesn't actually create more empathy or create system change. It just makes somebody think, oh my goodness, I couldn't do this every day. How do you live and do this, right? It creates, it almost perpetuates stigma instead of reducing it. And we lack enough representation as it is. Any effort to amplify lived experience would be best practice. I'm happy to tour anyone around Aurora and show them why I can't get in the door or can't use their bathroom.
And to that point, Allison, and Peter, I believe you brought it up, January or February now, when this video series idea did come up. I think that exact comment also came up, Allison, of showcasing people with disabilities do live in town. And if we can get those voices out there, we can get the experiences out there, we're hoping that businesses in Aurora that do come to Aurora can start to see that and understand that and see that the town does put accessibility forward and does care. And hopefully some of these issues that are arising can be addressed through that process. These are all hopes, because as John said, we need to change some of their thought processes and mentalities, and of course their biases and the ableism thinking with those individuals.
For all these people.
But yeah, sorry, Allison, is the hand still up or back?
Yeah,
up?
last comment is to Sean's point about articles. If the town isn't pushing any of their own national.
Oh no,
What happened?
Uh-oh.
we lost our internet.
Oh,
I believe I know what she's going to say, and the answer is yes. I've already chatted with communications on that. I believe she's going to say share other organizations, National Accessibility Weeks
Allison's
items.
names come up on the corner already.
Oh, there she is.
Phoning in or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Allison.
You're on mute still.
Whoops.
It's dark. You're on mute. Get you lost.
Tell Max.
You're still muted, Allison. I'm not sure if you're trying to unmute.
While we're waiting for her, any the comments or questions on this? Come back to Allison when she. Oh,
Nope.
hey, Allison.
Sorry
Oh,
about
she's-
that. My computer died, so now I'm on my phone. Can you remind me what I was saying?
If the town isn't doing anything for national,
Oh.
and then you cut out.
Would there be appetite for one of us or multiple folks on the committee to do an op-ed to send to local media? And are we going to make use of, I know that previously we would post Aurora content through Newmarket Today, but Aurora is creating their own Aurora Today. So again, is it a good time to suggest content, and could we create that content ourselves versus asking the town to create it?
To be honest, don't see why not. This would be a,
We have to go through council. We can't, in the past, we couldn't make any recommendations or write letters or whatever. Because we're only acting as an advisory committee to council. Council will have to make those.
yes. Allison, to clarify, is this
I
A
could do it as a
resident?
resident.
As a resident, sure,
President?
Sure.
as a committee.
So yes, which is what I thought you were getting at, Allison. So yes, as a resident, absolutely. I can chat with our communication team because that is a relatively recent addition, that we do have that section in the Aurora Today, or there's a whole page, I believe, that Aurora is now responsible to create. So we can definitely look at something, but just be mindful, we are a couple weeks away-ish from National Accessibility Week, and I'm not sure about deadlines. A lot of my content had to already been completed. We are kind of keeping it close with deadlines with these videos. So just be mindful. If we can do something like that, we have a year for next year, right? So we have more than enough time to work on something for next year, knowing that's something that can be done. I'm just not sure if times allow us, because between publishing, you got to think editing backwards, you're looking at least a week or two for submission, which may be the end of this week, right? So to get some content in, so just not to say no, but definitely something to consider. And maybe it's a something we look at for July or August, because why not, right? If something comes up, or if we want to just have that conversation to keep a conversation going, why not just do it throughout the summer? And we can talk about whatever you like about summer, or something like that. So doesn't have to be for National Accessibility Week, but definitely something I think we could do as residents, and I guess find the right avenue to do that for you all.
Good, Allison?
Yeah.
I agree with Allison. Getting that story out, I think, is key. I come from the media, and I think it's really important that not only the story gets out, and the videos are great. That's a fantastic idea, but to build a 360 loop with the community, right? That they can access and talk to us.
Publicity.
Yes, that feedback is, we provide a home for them to come back to. Somewhere that they can express their feedback as well. It's not just a one-way communication.
Right. And hopefully, and I think we chatted about this when Peter brought up the idea way back when, we do get more voices. We do start to have our individuals with disability at last consensus data. It's 10 to 15,000 residents in Aurora with disabilities that are known. So much lower than the provincial standard or even the regional numbers. But there is still quite a few 10 to 15,000 residents that do live or identify as having a disability. And hopefully we start to see those out there. As Matt said with Town Park, 20 plus, another 10 that showed up to the open house, and then a handful that actually communicated with them directly. That's nowhere near 100, let alone 10,000. So if we can get more accessibility into the community and still really start to show the work that we are doing and amplify those voices, the hope is that parents, families, caregivers, and individuals themselves do come back and do start to speak out and do start to participate. And that leads us into our next conversation. I mean, we've had a great conversation tonight. But before I do lead into the next one, anyone else, any questions on?
No, but what you
This
just
item?
said to me is just correct. And I'm just thinking, the more we can get everybody in town to work with us, as I said, the doors, the whatever,
Mhm.
the better it is
Mhm.
all the way around.
Yeah, it won't happen tomorrow.
No, I
So
know.
we
I
gotta
know it won't.
slowly.
But I think we have to
slowly get
work
it.
towards it.
Yep. All right, so the next item, I have half an hour, mindful of time. I'm gonna go through this a little bit quicker than I originally planned to. We're gonna discuss the recreational needs assessment for persons with disabilities. So back on April 28th, again, this was in one of the emails I did send out. It was a beautiful day outside, one of the nicest days we had in a long time. So unfortunately, no one showed up. So we were at the Aurora Family Leisure Complex. We had some great discussions with the Canadian Hearing Services interpreter that we brought in, our consultants and their staff, Jody, as well as the project team and myself. But it was just us having that conversation. So what they did do, and I do encourage you all, because there is a what's it called? An enticement to complete the survey at the end of it, once you do complete it, or a gift card. But there is a survey out still on the same page, engageaurora.ca/RNA, Rec Needs Assessment, to complete that. But what we're going to do today is I just want to do a high-level overview of the What We Heard document that is also available on that page. We'll talk about those key themes, the feedback that was received. We'll go through some of the information that is there, but also the documents that was provided and the activity that was provided for those that would have showed up if they showed up. I have that copy. So we can do this as a committee. We can kind of provide our feedback and input, and then I can provide that back to the consultant. The deadline is Friday. I am in a conference the rest of this week, so I have committed to get this out to her tonight, or first thing in the morning. So at least she has our feedback of what we've heard. Next steps from this point, they're going to finalize the plan and prepare an implementation plan, and then be presented to council with a final report of the assessment. I can tell you that this project's team has done absolutely everything in their power to try and get feedback in every way, shape, and form, from in-person to virtual to blended options to surveys to social media to the Engage Aurora platform, and multiple days, multiple avenues, and at total, I believe there was 140 or 170 total respondents in all different areas, which includes this committee, which is 7 or 8 of us. It includes counselors, it includes town staff, about 10 of us, as well as I believe 70 or 80 community members from various different avenues, from blind or random telephone interviews, I should say, to, and they only targeted persons with disabilities for those phone service as well as online service. So that is where we're at today. Different items that has come up, and I'm just going to bring up their document so we can go through it together. So this will be a little activity, like similar to what they've done with us in the past. So the goals, and I'm just going to share my screen so we can all see them. And then we'll go through the documents together. You all see that? It's about as big as I can make it. So the draft goals, there are 6 of them. So number 1, inclusive programming and empowerment, ensuring diversity of programming that is inclusive, adaptable to individual needs, and empowers participants. Quality of care and support, prioritizing well-trained staff and adequate resources, provide the support, enhancing overall experience to participants. Accessible spaces and programs, addressing financial, transportation, and other accessibility barriers to participation. Representation and engagement, creating an volunteer or employment opportunities for people with disabilities, creating more active engagement and representation in all aspects of recreation, which includes marketing and advertising, social media, that sort of thing. Adaptive equipment and supports, increasing the availability of adaptive sport and fitness equipment, providing more supports to ensure inclusivity and greater accessibility. And finally, communication and awareness, enhancing communication and awareness of program offerings with diverse and accessible information distribution. So these are their main goals. And for, for implementation that they have just some questions here. Is there anything that they're missing? Any changes that are recommended to make? Or any that we really strongly agree with as written? So those are the 3 questions that are proposed to us. I'm just going to shrink this a little more so I can get all 6 on the screen at the same time. So that's my first question to this committee. Do we feel that these 6 goals are relevant? Do we feel that there's anything missed? I did provide one additional comment to consider unstructured play as part of this process. So a lot of this is really geared towards structured play, being programming options or internal available space, but also just those drop-in opportunities and our outdoor spaces, our playgrounds, our outdoor fields, and what opportunities do we have to cover this recreational need or unstructured play. And we heard about it this earlier today with Matt and our really our holistic accessible playground, but also some of those other aspects. And I'm just thinking, Peter, you mentioned accessible outdoor fitness equipment as one of the options, right? And that wasn't really something covered here. So these are some of the things that I added, which I felt was maybe a piece that was missed. But anything else? Any other questions or comments? Just, in the sake of time, we'll get 1 or 2 kind of comments. Anything grossly missing or really we feel strongly for, I can highlight, and then we can move forward with. There's only like 5 other sections that we have to go through. So
I don't know if I mentioned one thing that bothers me a lot is the York Region Transit. They go and pick up, like one of the fellows is picked up in Keswick comes down to Newmarket for our choir. That's has all the people in it that have their intellectual challenges and physical challenges. And those people they'll bring him down at 6 o'clock when it's supposed to be 7. They bring him down at 6 o'clock and he's supposed to be picked up at 8:15. They pick him up at 9 and they leave him standing out there. So there's no thought given to people having these challenges and what they're going to do.
So I can speak to that as you mentioned, it is York Region and Region's responsibility for that. That's not something, but as part of this transportation
But it's leaving
is a
people
consideration.
in our towns standing there and not having anybody with them and it, winter or whatever.
Hmm.
But that's what they do to them on a regular basis, and we've tried to ask them about it. They don't know either, the drivers, that's what they say.
Any other comments on these goals? Any ones we feel strongly for or against?
There are 3 accessible spaces. My daughter went to the gym at the FLC.
Mhm.
And she just couldn't get around because it was so tightly.
Yeah.
Put in there.
Yep.
She uses a walker.
So much of it, you mean? So much
Yeah.
equipment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, it's geared towards people with abilities, but
Mhm. Of course, they're larger pieces of equipment too, that's one of the problems. Yeah.
We could give us some examples of adaptive sport. Like hockey.
Yep, sledge hockey, wheelchair basketball, seated volleyball, and that sort of thing. So I know that our sport and community development coordinator is looking at parasport and starting to look at inclusive sports to bring it into town. Actually working with Sledge Hockey Ontario, I believe, to see if we can have one of our facilities as a central hub for there, because they don't have a central location for Para Hockey Ontario. So to see if they can come in and then of course that would require retrofits to our facilities, as currently they're not as accessible as we would like them to be, especially our rinks, I should say. Allison?
It addresses communication, but after I had attended one of the sessions with Jody, I did go look through our programs guide, and eventually I found the accessibility and inclusive programs info, but it was just so buried that I gave up. So like, I think it needs to be the first pages and not buried at the end. And also an ability within our programs, it's, in some cases, it's not that we lack the things, it's that it's so hard to find that information. So better ways to like filter through and identify if I'm on ePlay that I can search. And to be honest, I haven't looked, so maybe that's there, but just enhancing that. And then the other piece that's, we can get hyper focused on disability, of course, as accessibility, but in the spirit of transportation and finances and all those other things, exploring childcare. If there's people that want to be participating in programs, can there be sufficient childcare available to families? That's my current barrier to coming to work out, is childcare.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Sean?
Yeah, Allison, that kind of leads into my question. How are they defining prioritize well-trained staff and adequate resources? Again, I'm a rookie. What resources are available? What kind of training is the staff receiving?
So from what I recall, when this was brought up in some of the sessions, staff mainly with seasonal employees do have, again, the accessibility training that we provide for all new staff, and then specific training depending on the programs that they are offering. It's more so self-guided or of interest or things that they've kind of done on their own. But all our summer camp staff do go through an extra, I think, behavioral management systems, I think it's called, training that all inclusion staff do go through in addition to the other training. And they are hired specifically a behavioral management specialist, I believe is what they're called, for summer camps. And this is where the bulk of town part-time staff, I mean, they are 16 to 20-year-olds coming in to do some of these programming options. But when we also talk about staff, comments did come up that participants and residents weren't even aware of what those staff are. So similar to your question being asked, I'm giving you an answer based on kind of the comments that were brought up, but that information isn't always transparent and open and upfront. So again, similar to Allison's comment, being transparent with that conversation. And I do know from the manager of recreation, the program guide can always change because now it's a digital guide. It's not printed anymore. The layout and the pages and the location of certain things and what we add in there, we have much more flexibility now than we have in the past. So these are some of the things that we can start to add. That is just, Sean, just some of the comments that I heard through the last couple of months that have been brought up. Questions that you just mentioned were specifically asked. And that's kind of where this point is. The goal and the direction of that item is to make sure staff are trained, to ensure that they have adequate and the appropriate training for the programs that they may be running, again, internally, externally, and whatever the case is. So hopefully that answers that question.
That answers that question. Yeah, and gives me information I didn't have. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Okay.
Behavioral management council.
Good luck.
We'll go to Haley and then we'll move on. Oh, sorry. Haley and then Joanne.
Okay, just one thing I noticed all throughout, but specifically like in adaptive equipment, it only mentions sports and fitness, but what about getting equipment for art and music? Right, like they want diversity of programming, but then all of their equipment's only focused on sports.
Yep, good point. You have anything else, Ed?
One thing that comes up when I hear all of this is, I wonder, our recreation department within the town, do they have anybody that does any kinesiology, any therapy and stuff like that? Not that they would be doing it here, but they would be able to contribute to what those people do. And
So we do not, but our inclusion camp, summer camp staff go through, again, some of the other training that they also go through is lifts and holds and feeding and medication and a lot of those other assistive things that they might need to do to ensure that the children in the summer camps can handle and manage and to support and that sort of thing. We also have mediator options. So if there is a caregiver or a support person that individual needs, they are also welcome into our spaces and into our programs at no additional cost to those families.
There's an ongoing, some people in it, like I know somebody that's in kinesiology right now, but he's working with a basketball team, for instance, and he works with other things. So he's all over the place, doing things and helping out. So I just thought if the town had those people there, they could be training themselves to people that came in to work.
So I can bring that forward, more of in-house trainers with specialty knowledge. A lot of the stuff is outsourced for training as well. But yeah.
Allison, is your hand still up from last time or is that new?
That's
New one.
Okay.
Just back to the training. I used to work at Variety Village. It was my first job. And I know that their team does a lot of outreach and training, and especially as summer camps gear up, they have a lot of towns take their summer staff either to Variety Village, or Variety Village will come to the town and help provide some support. And it goes, it's how do you support people physically and related to their disability, but it's also good to have training around what is inclusive language and all of those things that create a safe and inclusive experience. But Variety Village might be a good resource to explore for training.
I'll make a note of that, but I do know that it was brought up as part of this to explore partnerships in our community to assist with the recreational needs, but it also goes beyond the town, but also the organizations in town that we can support and vice versa, that they can support us. So I know that was a conversation that did come up at the end of April as well. All right. We have 15 minutes. Lesson. So let's go quickly. Goal 1. So like I said, there's 4 or 5 goals here. We'll quickly go through it, but ensure programming is inclusive, adaptable to individual needs, and empowers participants. So these are more of some of that detail. Now that I think about it, we may have already talked about a lot of this stuff. So feedback mechanisms to adapt programming feedback for the evolving needs, introducing wide range of inclusive and adaptive programs catering to various disabilities, age groups, to empower participants for their skills, implement regular training for staff, so not just seasonally, but regularly, and then offer try-it days for individuals with disabilities to see what programs may suit their needs. They like it, not like it, and that way there's no commitment. So these are some of the ways that we can assist with that. There's some circles and some triangles you see on the screen here. The basically is which one of these do we feel really, would be a focus, something we should absolutely look into, is number 1. And so what should be part of the plan, and what do you think is the most important? I've heard training a lot, so I'm going to Haley.
So I have some concerns with the try-it days. I get the aspect of it and kind of the trying to empower, but it could also not give good indications of what the program would be. And there's a lot of things I could see go wrong and not end up being as helpful as they may think it will be.
So are you saying more so offer a try-it day, see what the uptake is, and then run the program? Is that
No, I'm just saying like the try-it day in general, I could see there being a lot of issues with it that would potentially bring up not helping them meet their goal as much as they think it would be.
Okay. For the other items, anyone we kind of feel
I just want to say I agree with the training probably being the most important one to highlight there.
Oh, triangle. Sorry, wrong one. Okay, next one. We talk about training. Prioritizing well-trained staff and adequate resources, establishing a continuous professional development program for staff, emergency preparedness, communication strategies. I think we've mentioned a lot of these items. Partnering with local organizations. There we are, Allison. Ensuring staff to participant ratios are adequate. Currently, there is a one-to-one support for our summer camp programs. There is a volunteer-based program for our group-based programs. And that leads into our volunteer program that includes people with disabilities to offer peer support, shared lived experiences, and to system program delivery. Any comments, thoughts on this one?
I think points 1 and 3 are critical for me.
Yep.
Staffing is very important and their development.
Okay. Sorry for going quickly.
Maybe just to add something to that, beyond the continuous development, the continuous professional development, just the initial training, I suppose, needs to be captured as well.
Okay. Which I think is in the previous point.
Right.
Initial and then the continuous.
Right.
Okay. So addressing financial, transportation, accessibility barriers to full participation, collaborate with local transportation, join to this point, options to get to and from our recreational facilities, exploring opportunities to make them more affordable for individuals with disabilities, developing strategies to review and implement recommendations from our facility audit. So this is the accessibility assessment that we did complete. So using that information to address those physical barriers, and then continue to offer virtual programming to mitigate some of those transportation and other physical barriers that one might have coming into in-person programming. And if we feel all of the above, we can say all of the above. That's fine too.
I think
Anyone wanna
affordability is huge, especially if somebody's on ODSP, like they don't have disposable income, make it free.
Agreed. And is there currently virtual programming?
There are for some programs, virtual. The item there came up again, just from my recollection of some of the focus groups, to ensure virtual programming options are in many more. So if there's an art program per se, that people can do their art at their house. So to add in virtual programming to certain programs. So currently the town offers hybrid or virtual programming courses specifically, but the comment here is to add virtual options to the existing programming that we may have, if that makes sense.
Way it's written, it doesn't indicate adding, it says continue. Maybe we could change the wording.
Yep. That's fair. Alrighty, next one. Creative volunteer and employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. Developing a dedicated outreach program to recruit volunteers and employees with disabilities, to ensure job postings and volunteer opportunities are accessible and promoted through various channels, and implement a mentorship program that pairs experienced individuals with disabilities in leadership roles with those interested in volunteering or employment opportunities in recreation.
Is that like targeted hiring?
Could be. More so volunteer program.
In terms of outreach and talked about remote programs, are there any stats that talk about whether those with disabilities are more online and glued to their PCs or phone than those who are not? You know, teenagers and those who don't have disability, they're glued to their
Yep.
any social media stuff. But do we have any stats on those?
I don't think we have stats specifically. I'm not sure if that's even something that is tracked.
Even anecdotally?
Yeah,
Just as-
from what is heard, it's a range. It really comes down to the different disabilities of the individual, their support network around them, and from what we've heard, there were parents of children that were in their 30s and 40s that were having these conversations. There were parents of toddler age that were part of this these focus groups, and really everyone in between, and every option. So I think it was the conversation was more so, again, to the virtual option to help to alleviate some of the barriers by allowing virtual options for certain programs that you can participate. And Haley, I think this goes along with the music and the arts and some of the things beyond sport and fitness that they might be doing from home, or even fitness, like things you can do from home kind of thing. So I think that's where that is.
I was just wondering, the opportunities in recreation, and I know where you're going with that, but is it not a place that we could put in or employment? Because is there any reason why they could not be employed by the town?
So absolutely not.
No,
I think this is,
Because
this is
what-
talking about recruitment.
Yeah.
Again, the title is employment and volunteer opportunities,
yeah.
so it's both.
One of the girls in our choir that's challenged, she's been working 18 years at the Board of Education. And another one's been working, she just got her 20-year pin at Metro.
Hmm.
And they're both challenged.
Yep.
Individuals, not in a wheelchair, but they are intellectually challenged. So I think that could be created for everything, not
Yep.
just recreation.
Allison?
I would only caution that it can be really a slippery slope when disabled folks are volunteering, but end up doing something that a non-disabled person would be paid for. So I know that employment's included, but anything that takes emotional labor outside of this advocacy group, where of course we're volunteering and know we're volunteering, but if there's even mentorship programs, I think considering and implementing honorariums are really important and should be thought through. I heard from a researcher the other day at work, and they make a point of paying cash because they know that folks with disabilities who are in the system, like ODSP, for example, can't necessarily earn extra income. So mitigating for that and considering that. And then also, what was my last point? I'm gonna put my hand down. I'm forgetting, but I'll email you if I remember later.
Okay.
Oh, mentorship, friends, video gaming. So the research at Home Blurview would probably err on what Harold said about preferring gaming and being online. And there's a few reasons for that, but we implement video gaming into a lot of new therapy technologies because kids will be motivated by the game. It's also a way to foster friendships and connection. So some of that looks like playing a shared video game together and being connected. And anyways, there is research to talk about that if we want to dig it up.
I think that helps answer that. Thank you, Allison. Okay, it's 9:00.
The, sorry.
And I've got to
One,
mention this
two.
before we go.
2 more.
I know, but I need to.
Do I have a motion to extend for 10 minutes? Is that okay? Finish us off?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Finish my quick.
Okay. So increase the availability of adaptive sport and fitness, securing funds through grants, donations, and partnerships for additional equipment, organizing adaptive equipment demonstration days for participations, try different equipment, provide feedback on what works based on their needs, develop training programs to ensure staff are knowledgeable about the proper use, maintenance, and safety on the equipment, and partner with community organizations, advocacy groups, and local sport clubs for additional resources and expertise coming into the town where we may not have. So Haley, to your point of arts and music and some of those other activities, I already made note of that. Any 2 items here that we feel like is a must we want to see?
This might just be a wording issue, just in that first point. Not only funding, you might even have equipment donated directly. So something to consider, that if you have not just funding for equipment, but actual equipment itself. I know that my son, as he's outgrown things, we've generally found some place to donate them to, as long as there's something suitable for donation.
That's fair. Okay. And to that point, so we were actually donated a sledge. We did have a sledge hockey event, I believe. Sledge Hockey Ontario came in and did it a few years ago. And it was an older sledge, and they didn't have a need for it, and they left it with us. So to that point. We'll just make sure it's in writing. Okay, the last one here, enhance communication and awareness of program offerings, developing a comprehensive marketing strategy that includes the digital content, social media, and local media partnerships. Before I move forward, I heard, I think, every single one of these points in today's meeting, so I'm going to go ahead and put that one there. But also creating accessible information through various formats, large print, braille, audio, etc., and different languages to also reach a diverse audience. Creating an accessibility ambassador program where people can connect directly with someone else to provide that detailed information, assist in registration, and coordinate their needs. And implement a centralized, accessible online portal where participants can easily find information about programs, how to register, and to provide their feedback. Any other items that we feel like is a must? We want to see
Point
as part
four
of
is
the
key for
fund?
me.
Sorry?
Point 4 would be key for me.
And Allison, you mentioned it earlier about going through the guide and finding stuff. I think that point 4 would also assist there. Kelly?
I would say point 2, especially in today's day with the languages.
Mhm.
We're a very diverse community.
And plain language. Folks with intellectual disabilities sometimes have difficulties with online portals. Depending on what it's talking about and how intuitive it is. So offering different options to get that information.
I'll put it in both. So to this point, we're actually working with a new widget for our website, which would include our registration software as well, I believe, to have some of these additional features, which does convert the web pages to plain language, will audio transcribe, has different languages, increases large print and that sort of thing. So it's a more robust tool than what we currently have. And hopefully this year we will transfer to that.
Plain language could be made at point of origin because
Yep.
it's universal.
Yep.
Right?
Okay. Alrighty. That, I believe, is it for this item. Thank you all for your feedback. I did write a lot of your notes, so we will go ahead and I will convert that and provide it. But again, like I said earlier, the recreational Engage Aurora /RNA is the website. The current survey is live on there, and feel free to go on there and provide your personal comments by the end of the week. I know it doesn't give much time, but after submitting, you have a chance for gift certificate. So encourage everyone to do so. And since we've extended, one other option or one other thing I wanted to cover is we've talked a lot about it over this past year, actually this whole term. And I want to really start to have a conversation around some of the things that this committee does, some of the initiatives that we've discussed, and some of the upcoming initiatives that are, just looking ahead to doing. So, for example, our terms of reference. I know that it was sent to us when you all started the committee, but to really look at those 7 or 8 points that are in the terms of reference to see, do they need updating? Do we feel that those current items are still relevant? Do we feel like we can adapt them, to update them, to change them, and to take a critical look at how it's written, what is written, and refresh our memories, if you will, on the content that is in there. And then we can start to have a thorough conversation on those terms of reference and the content that or the purpose, I guess, of this committee Do we feel that it's sufficient, or do we feel like we should look to make improvements on it and provide recommendation? The multi-year accessibility plan is coming to an end in 2026. So to start looking ahead now, as 2025, we will be, starting to look at creating our new multi-year accessibility plan. Get it finalized. You'll get the approval from this committee into 2025, into 2026, and have it ready for the new term of council to be presented after the 2026 election. And then that endorsement. So come 2027, it is already endorsed, and we will have a new accessibility advisory committee to do that. So also special events, so haunted forest and treat accessibly. So we can have thorough conversations as involvement of this committee. How can we work with our community for some of our special events and really provide a review of events, of some of our initiatives, and how did they work? What could we change moving forward, and that sort of thing. And all in all, how I and the town can support some of the initiatives that we are bringing forward. So we talk a lot about what can the town do to fill in the blank. So this is, I think, our way and my way of trying to just get all of your inputs, get that recommendation, and really take that critical look as we move forward. Are there new strategies? Are there new solutions? Are there things that we maybe haven't thought about? That terms of reference was created. John, you've been around for a while, probably hasn't changed much since then, right? It's derived right from the AODA. So is there anything else that maybe we can do? So I just want to bring that forward, that the idea here is every month moving forward for the rest of this year, I'm going to bring one item forward. We can have a wholesome discussion on that one item. And I'll tell you for June upcoming, we'll start with our terms of reference since it's relatively fresh. It governs kind of what we do and how we do it. And then let's take a critical look. So homework to you all, take a review of those items in our terms of reference. Do we feel like it's sufficient? Do we want to go above and beyond? What does that look like? And how can, again, myself and our town staff support some of these initiatives moving forward? Okay.
It's Greg. We're nearing our 10 minutes, so we'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Nothing informational. Any new business?
Well, they asked me, I asked if
Fine,
I
has
could
one.
say something, yeah. I've been a member of the Voices of Joy, which is an intellectually challenged and physically challenged adult choir for about 20 some odd years. This is going to be our 25th anniversary concert, and we're having it in Newmarket at the Bethel Church, which is across the road from Lorne at the big apartments there, 333 Davis Drive. There's a free will offering, but there's going to be food supplied. There's going to be raffles. I know there's 4 tickets coming from the Blue Jays, for instance. And so anyway, if you could come along and give some support, that would be wonderful. We've seemed to get a good turnout every year. So, yep, please come.
Thanks. With that, we have a motion to adjourn. Lois, seconded by John. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.